Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing a razor-thin line of fire literally cutting the moon in half. It is not a meteor shower. It is not a solar flare. It is a 60,000-mile-long guillotine wire, weighing millions of tons, falling directly toward the equator at 22 times the speed of sound. You have exactly 4 hours to evacuate half the globe, and absolutely nowhere to run. For decades, it was hailed as the absolute pinnacle of human engineering, the ultimate triumph over gravity, the space elevator. A glistening ribbon of braided carbon nanotubes stretching from a floating anchor station in the equatorial Pacific, going straight up through the clouds, passing the International Space Station, and terminating at a massive captured asteroid in geostationary orbit. It made traditional chemical rockets completely obsolete overnight. It turned humanity into a true multiplanetary species. It was a bridge to the stars. But we completely forgot one fundamental, terrifying rule of physics: the taller the tower, the harder it falls. The nightmare doesn't start with a massive Hollywood-style alien invasion or a global nuclear war. It starts with just 5 people. 5 heavily armed extremists who perfectly understand orbital mechanics, riding a standard commercial climber car 30,000 miles above the Earth's surface. They aren't trying to take hostages. They aren't issuing political demands. They are carrying a payload of highly experimental directed-yield thermonuclear-shaped charges, and they haven't placed these charges at the bottom of the elevator or at the top. They have calculated the exact mathematical center of gravity of the entire structure, the tension point where the centrifugal force of the spinning Earth perfectly balances against the crushing pull of gravity. They press a single button. The vacuum of space swallows the flash of the explosion, and the greatest architectural marvel in human history is violently severed in half. If someone blows up a skyscraper, the building collapses into its own footprint. But when you sever a space elevator, you unleash a kinetic apocalypse that the human brain is simply not wired to comprehend. The moment the tether snaps, the tension is instantly released. The top half of the elevator, still firmly attached to the massive asteroid counterweight, behaves like a slingshot that has just been let go. It violently snaps upward, instantly accelerating and flinging the massive station out into the dark, freezing void of the solar system. The people up there are dead, but their death will be slow. The bottom half of the tether, however, has a much more violent fate. You now have 30,000 miles of hyperdense carbon mesh, weighing more than every battleship ever built combined, hanging directly over the Earth with absolutely nothing holding it up. Gravity instantly takes over, but it doesn't just drop straight down. This is where the physics of the situation turn from a tragedy into an extinction-level event. Because the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, the falling cable begins to wrap around the planet. It is the exact same mechanical principle as a bullwhip, but on a planetary scale. For the first 2 hours, the world simply watches in absolute paralyzed horror. News anchors weep on live television, militaries scramble fighter jets and launch interceptor missiles, but it is completely useless. You cannot shoot down a solid carbon nanotube structure. Nuclear warheads detonate against the falling ribbon, barely leaving a scorch mark. It is literally indestructible, and it is picking up speed. As the colossal tether hits the upper atmosphere, the sheer friction turns the black carbon into a blinding river of white-hot plasma. To the people standing on the ground, the sky appears to tear open. The ambient temperature on the surface spikes by 30 degrees in a matter of minutes. The oceans begin to rapidly evaporate just from the radiant heat of the glowing line descending from the heavens. But the heat isn't what kills you. The kinetic energy is. When the tip of the tether finally strikes the Earth's surface, it doesn't hit with a thud, it hits with a supersonic crack that permanently deafens every living creature within a 500-mile radius. And because of the Earth's rotation, the burning cable begins to aggressively drab across the equator at hypersonic speeds. It touches down first in the Pacific Ocean, instantly vaporizing millions of gallons of seawater and kicking up a super tsunami that towers 1,000 feet high. But the tether doesn't stop. It is a burning planetary chainsaw wrapping around the globe. It hits Quito, Ecuador. There is no explosion. The city simply ceases to exist. Skyscraper-sized chunks of bedrock are violently ripped from the Earth and thrown into the stratosphere. The tether violently drags across the Amazon rainforest, instantly igniting a firestorm so massive it sucks the oxygen out of the atmosphere for hundreds of miles, suffocating millions of animals before the flames even reach them. It cuts a glowing molten trench right through the heart of Africa, slicing the continent in half. It shreds Nairobi. It completely obliterates Singapore. The sheer kinetic friction of millions of tons of carbon grinding against the Earth's crust at Mach 20 melts the sand and rock, leaving behind a perfectly straight, perfectly smooth glass canyon hundreds of feet deep and miles wide. And as the final miles of the severed tether whip around the globe, snapping down with the concentrated force of 1,000 thermonuclear warheads, a terrifying silence falls over the planet. The ash cloud kicked up by the impact completely blocks out the sun. The equator is wrapped in a permanent glowing ring of magma. Hundreds of millions of people are gone in a matter of minutes, not by a bomb, not by an asteroid, but by our own ambition. We looked up at the infinite void of space and decided to build a ladder to the gods. We wove the strongest material in the universe and anchored it to our home. We thought we had finally conquered the stars. We never stopped to think that if you tie a rope around your own neck and hand the other end to the universe, eventually something in the dark is going to pull it. The space elevator was supposed to be our ultimate salvation. Instead, it became the most perfectly engineered noose in the history of the cosmos.